A very warm welcome to you. Good morning. I'm Bronwyn Maddox. I'm the Director and Chief Executive of Chatham House, the think tank on international relations based in London. Delighted to be here. Delighted to be having this conversation with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, Mauro Vieira. Very warm welcome to you too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. And I'm looking forward to all your questions, so start getting them ready, and some coming in as well, I think, on Slido. So I wanted to start off with the ambitions of the new Lula administration. And Brazil has always, particularly under the previous Lula administration, had ambitions of trying to forge a global role as leader of the global South in trade, in multilateral reform, in investment, in peace negotiations, all these things. And I wondered how you would describe the ambitions of the new Lula administration in this role of leadership of the Global South, particularly as we're meeting today with this background of competition, particularly between the US and China.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to discuss these issues about the foreign policy and the main goals of President Lula. I would say that when he invited me to this position, of course, I was very honored, and he told me we have to reestablish our position in the world. Brazil has been absent of most international organizations and very few contacts with other countries, so he told me to rebuild bridges and reach out to our neighbors at the beginning, the first move, and also to the traditional partners of Brazil. And he has, in 45 days, he has spoken on the phone or met bilaterally in trips he made, or those heads of delegations, high-level delegation he received for his inauguration, has met with something like 44 heads of states. And this is the first, let's say, the first step forward to reestablish a very clear position of Brazil in the world stage, where he wants to again, stress the importance of solving our social problems such as hunger, education, health, and all that. And besides that, being also an active voice in terms of global governance, reform of multilateral institutions, and promoting fair trade between countries and blocs. So this is the main, and to recover the economy in Brazil and the situation. He told me at the beginning and said publicly that his goal now has to be much more ambitious than it was when he was his first two terms, when fighting hunger was very important. Now he said that he has to do much more than that, not only to recover what was lost during the last years, but also to guarantee to the population even better, everyday better health system and education. So these are, I would say, the main lines.
Sure. Thank you. And they're not small ambitions.
No, not at all.
And as you say, many of them necessarily and importantly focused at home within Brazil. But I just want to push you a bit on the ambitions outside Brazil. Under the previous president, Bolsonaro, the Trump administration was dangling the possibility of Brazil becoming an associate member of NATO. And I wondered whether the Lula administration might continue to be interested in that.
No, because we're not in the North Atlantic, we're in the South Atlantic, so it would be a geographical impossibility. And besides that, I think it's not, our constitution says very clearly that we cannot have nuclear weapons. So I don't think it would be a club in which we would fit.
Yeah. But NATO has been flexible in its sense of geography, sometimes in the past. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate a direct no. It's not always one gets that in these conversations.
Yeah, but no.
Thank you for that. Let's come on to Ukraine, which obviously is an enormous topic of conversation and discussion here in Munich and many, many other places. And your president, you yourself, have gone to some lengths to say, look, we're not taking sides. The country said to Chancellor Scholz, no, we're not sending ammunition to help. What is it you think Brazil can do then to help broker a discussion about the ending of this conflict?
Yeah, well, it's an issue, a matter of great concern, of course, although we are very far away, but Brazil is a peaceful country, and President Lula has always fought to preserve peace in our region and in the world. Since the beginning of his government, he deplored strongly the aggression and also the invasion. It's against international law, and he condemned what happened. But on the contrary, we didn't impose sanctions because we cannot under our legislation. Only those sanctions approved by the Security Council of the United Nations. Otherwise, it's illegal. So we did. And what he said is that he has heard a lot about weapons, ammunition, and war, and he wants to hear more about peace and peace negotiation. A lot of people ask me, did he present the program of mediation of the war that Brazil would like to implement? No, he didn't. What he said is that Brazil is ready to help whenever possible, and if the parties involved want, with a group of countries, because this is not a task we could do alone, or no country in the world could do alone, to gather a number of countries that would have good dialogue as we have with both sides, and try to break a deal, some negotiation, or at least start some negotiation that would lead to a ceasefire and then negotiations of other, let's say, other steps to be taken towards peace. But that's it, and that's what we would like to see. Yes, you said about ammunition, send ammunition. We didn't. We will not do that. Instead of taking part in the war, we prefer to talk about peace.
Thank you for that. Let me take us, because I'm just going to ask, there's a few minutes more of questions in this conversation, but I really want to bring in people's questions, which is the spirit of this public square discussion. Let me take us to one of the other big themes that this weekend is discussing, and that is the rivalry between the US and China. And China has obviously worked very hard and spent a great deal of money supporting, investing, it would say, in many countries, buying influence, some buying dependency, some US politicians would say. There are talks going on at the moment, the IMF, about debt relief for some countries and pushing China to try to follow the Paris Club rules on that. What is your view of the help that the involvement that China has taken in many countries, and how it should now respond, for example, to the debt predicament of some of those countries?
Well, China grew a lot in the last 50 years and became a very important actor, international actor. For instance, in Brazil, since 2010, China is by far the first trade partner. And the bilateral trade we have with China is very, very big today. It's very important. And one of the few in which we have a surplus, which makes it even more important. And we have always had traditionally a very good relation, but since the 70s or the beginning of the 80s, we have a number of programs of research in different areas of science and technology. We have a number of different programs of cooperation. We have always worked on that with China for the last 40 years at least. And we have this good relations with both countries. Just to give you an idea, next year we are celebrating 200 years of diplomatic relations and exchange of ambassadors with the United States. It was the second country in the world to recognize the independence of Brazil. The first was Argentina this year. In June is 200 years, and next year's we'll celebrate with the United States. So the United States is an old and traditional partner and very important, very close. We also work together a lot, and China became a world player, and we also have this important, very important relation. In our case, we look for the interest of Brazil, the national interest in both relations. So in our case, there is no difficulty, there is no
contradiction, no tension.
No contradiction at all. We have excellent relations with them, and this is very easy to prove. Our ambassador here in Germany was ambassador in China for a long time. He knows this issue much better than me, so maybe he could help me with this question. But that's the way we see it.
Thank you. I might quiz you afterwards if you don't ask a question. Let me turn to a crisis on your own continent in Venezuela. And this is somewhere that many people, many countries are hoping that the Lula government might help promote the negotiations between the Venezuelan opposition and the Maduro government, because the elections taking place, supposed to take place in 2024, and everyone wants them to be free and fair. And yet, you know, we have this background of this crisis. More than 7 million people have fled the country, humanitarian disaster, the International Criminal Court investigating crimes against humanity, and all these things. What is Brazil's role in this?
Well, Venezuela is a very important, huge and important neighbor, one of our 10 neighbors. We have more than 2,000 kilometers of borders in the Amazon, which makes it even a more important neighbor in a very delicate area. And one of the first things that I did under the instructions of President Lula on the third day of government was to reestablish relations with Venezuela, because the previous government had closed the embassy and 4 consulates we had in Venezuela because of ideological positions and differences in ideology, political ideology. We immediately reopened because we want to be present and to talk with every country, despite of the orientation, the political party. Our relations are from state to state. And we could not neglect the Venezuela, where we have 25,000 Brazilians living, and they had to travel or back to Brazil or to one of the neighboring countries if they needed any kind of consular assistance. So this is the first thing that we did. And of course, we would like to establish a dialogue and continue to talk as we did in the past. In 2015 and 16, I was also foreign minister under a different government, from President Dilma Rousseff, and we had a group, a troika of 3 countries, Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil, and we used to travel frequently, at least once a month, to Venezuela, and we established a table of negotiation, both with the government and the opposition. We saw from the president down to the judiciary, the legislative, and we would also meet with the opposition. That was accepted, and we exchanged the positions. We negotiated for 1 year. Finally, we succeeded in having the elections. They fixed the date for the election, and I must tell you that the government lost those elections, the legislative elections. So this is a good positive result of this mediation that Brazil did with two of our neighbors, and we hope to continue to do that because it's very important for Brazil to have a stable country and a peaceful society living so close and in such a long borderline with us. And of course, we'll continue to do whatever is in our reach to try to help. And with other organizations too, for instance, we worked during this period I mentioned, we worked a lot with the OAS, the Organization of American States, and many other institutions like the Carter Center in the United States, which helped a lot build the confidence necessary for the elections to take place.
Thank you for that. We might expand on that. Let me just ask you one final one, though I think it's very likely to come up in questions, and it's about the Amazon. And President Lula was elected again. Many countries, many environmental groups, many ordinary people said, great, this is a better chance for the Amazon. What happens now, and what international support would you like in protecting the Amazon?
Well, yeah, it was an important issue during his campaign, and immediately after he won the election, that was on the 30th of October, the second round, then in November he went to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt for the COP27. He was not a member of the Brazilian delegation, of course, he was just president-elect, and he went on the invitation of the president of Egypt and on a group called the Consortium of Governors, Brazilian governors of the states in the Amazonia. And they invited the president, and he delivered there at the COP27, this very powerful and important speech in which he set the basis of his environmental policy, which is let's say, a pillar of foreign policy too. It's very important. It's something that's in our foreign policy. Environment and climate change is one of the most important pillars. So he said many times that sovereignty over the Amazon belongs to Brazil, which has 60% of the Amazon, and to the other neighbors, the other 7 neighbors who share with us Amazonia. But he recognized that it's fundamental for Brazil and for the indigenous populations living there and to the world. And he needs and he wants to have the cooperation and participation of as many countries as possible to keep and to preserve the Amazon. During his first or second term, he established the Amazonia Fund. And this was completely paralyzed because of different measures that were taken, different policies that were taken in the last 4 years. And he, of course, when he announced the new policy for environment and climate change, many countries like Germany was the first, Norway, and last week when he visited the United States said they would do the same, and the foreign minister of France, who came to visit me in Brasilia, said the same. They will contribute to the Amazonian Fund, which is very important to finance programs in our part of Amazon, but also in the other countries. That's very, very important. His goal is to have zero deforestation in 2028 and to have 18 million hectares of devastated land reforested. That's his goal, immediate goal for the Amazon, and he wants to have similar programs with the neighbors. In Egypt, he presented the proposal to host COP30 in 2025 in the Amazon, in the city of Belém, which is the capital city of the state of Pará, in the north, extreme north of Brazil, to showcase Amazon and what we'll be doing till 2025. And he's also convening this year in August a summit of heads of states of the OTCA, which is the Organization of the Treaty of Amazonic Cooperation. 8 countries in the northern part of South America which share with Brazil Amazonian. And he wants to do that in August to be able to take the results of this important summit to his speech at the opening session of the General Assembly of the United States, of the United Nations in September.
Thank you for that. Let's go to questions. It's not that I've run out, but I think you will have a lot. And we've got about 25 minutes. Who'd like to start? Right at the back. And could you say your name, please?
Yes, my name is...
And could you wait for the microphone, do you think? Yep.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the question. My name is Michel Keres from Dutch NRC Handelsblad in Amsterdam. I wanted to take it back to Ukraine. You said that Brazil would like to help or start a peace talks in some degree with a coalition of other countries. Which countries are you thinking about that you would put together? And is this still an idea, or are you actually trying on background to pull a group like that together already?
Thank you for your question. No, this is an idea, this is a proposal. There's nothing in written, nothing specific. President Lula said, because it corresponds to him as head of state, when asked, he always answered that he would like to promote with other countries a space of dialogue, of pre-negotiations, to generate an ambience that would lead to more important talks, and that first would allow, I don't know, a ceasefire. I mean, he didn't present anything precise or concrete, just his wish to have the possibility of doing that with other countries. This is not something any country in the world can do alone. And of course, he always said that he would need the big players, the United States, China, India, and important developing countries. The European Union is, of course, is fundamental. We couldn't do anything without the European Union. And as many countries as possible, all countries desiring to take part and accepted by both sides, because it has to be like that. It would be something like, let's say, a political G20 or a wide and big group of countries that would push together and examine all possibilities of peace being negotiated.
You're not going to offer us any individual names?
No, as I said, well, from China, India, the European Union, the United States, of course, Japan, so many countries, all countries, but we are ready to take part in this kind of conversation if this group takes place, if this meeting between this group of countries takes place, and if we are accepted by and invited by both parties.
The question would just, one quick comment.
Yes,
again.
I'm not quite sure if the US and Europe would be an acceptable partner to discuss for Russia. So if you make the group this big, as you are proposing, then I'm not quite sure you get everybody on the table. How would that work?
Well, but that's the tricky part. You have to generate a situation in which you can talk. If we do not talk, it's what, 1 year now exactly, it can go on and on and on. And of course the whole world is suffering with that. It's not only cost of energy, it's inflation, it's migration. Well, it's a very, very serious situation.
There's going to be a lot more of this discussion. Here on the end, and then I'm going to come to the middle in this area.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Foreign Minister. I'm Regina Palandipaju from Estonian Defense Ministry. And I have a follow-up question, maybe to go to in a more precise direction. So there's a 10-point peace plan that's worked out by Ukraine and Ukrainian presidents, which encompasses a lot of different aspects, security, food security, nuclear security. And my question has to do with the fact: have you evaluated this kind of proposals? Have you looked at it in a more detailed way? Has Ukraine approached you? Because the idea of this peace plan also is to get together this kind of global coalition on various topics and to have various leaders on various points. So have you looked at this kind of peace project, peace plan in a more detailed way? Thank you.
Yes, I had a brief look at a resume of the proposal. President Lula received a delegation from Ukraine, headed by the deputy the deputy prime minister, and she presented us with this, let's say, a short proposal. It encompasses so many different aspects, all aspects related to the present situation of Ukraine. Of course, we understand and we recognize the problem that the territorial integrity is fundamental for us. Again, it's in our constitution. And the invasion, the move against international law, everything. But what I saw from that, it's a very ambitious and not ambitious, not the word, but a very comprehensive list of issues. Maybe to start some kind of conversation, should pick a few of these points and first generate some more positive things between the two parts, like the humanitarian agreement that were reached, by the possibility of exports of grains from Ukraine through the Black Sea. I mean, we have to start building with smaller issues, of course, all very important in this case, but the smaller ones that would lead maybe to the possibility for talks for ceasefire. I mean, an effort, just something like that. That's the way we see the possibilities. But otherwise, I think it would be very difficult to do something now.
Okay, thank you. Here in the center, and then I'm coming to the back.
Thank you, Minister. Food security is giving the crisis definitely in the top of the global agenda. Now, interestingly, the government of President Lula in the past had food security as a major priority. I wonder what you now in your new role and are planning to take on a leadership in the food security space, and what are some of your ideas of how to play with it? And Brazil will have the G20 presidency next year, etc.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to say who you are?
Oh, Helga Flores with Vieira.
Okay. Well, yes, food security continues to be a priority, and a very high priority in President Lula's program. During his first 2 terms, it was his main goal domestically to make sure that all Brazilians would have 3 meals a day, and he really succeeded in. According to FAO, Brazil was out of the map of hunger. So it was very, very important. It's no longer the situation again. We have a large proportion of the population below the line of poverty, extreme poverty, something like 15 or 20%. And of course, he has to, again, fight against it. And as I said at the beginning, he added 2 other issues. He said that it's not enough. If he does that again, it won't be enough, and he will be judged for not in doing more. And he said that besides fighting hunger, and assuring that the population would have access to meals, 3 meals a day, he also needs to provide health and education of good quality. And also he added later good employments, good quality employments. So those are the, let's say, the main priorities, but food security is very important in a country where the agribusiness moves maybe 1/3 of the GDP, which is big, and which is the second largest producer and exporter of foodstuff. It's a shame that we have people under the line of poverty and not being able to have 3 meals a day. So that's the position of the government.
Okay, thank you. Let's go here, gentleman in the white shirt.
Hello, Minister. I'm Torsten Benner with the Global Public Policy Institute in Berlin. I'd like to ask you about how you look at the role and function of Brazil in BRICS and the function of BRICS for Brazilian foreign policy if you compare it to the first Lula terms and the Dilma term in which you served and now, and has this partnership without limits between Russia and China made a difference in terms of how you look at your role in BRICS?
Well, BRICS is it was a very important group that was created not by Brazil. It was a proposal that was launched, and of course we took place in it with a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning, because it was a group, and it still is a group of developing countries, and we are going to host the BRICS in Brazil. We will be the presidents of BRICS in 2025. This year will be from 23 to 24. We'll have the presidency of the G20, and then the following year it will be the BRICS. It's a very important group with countries that that had in the past and have till today similar needs, and countries that can give some contribution in this group. For instance, I think, and now a lot of discussions about receiving more members at BRICS. And some countries want to have more, others are more resistant. We have no a priori position. We think that since it's a group of 5 countries, we can discuss openly, and if there is consensus for enlargement of this group, of course, we would like to see more countries taking part to be able to give their contribution to the goals and to the programs of BRICS. BRICS is not only an economic gathering or an economic group. We have policies in many different areas like education, health, and cooperation in different areas. Scientific, technological, researches in all areas. So it's very important to bring new names and new partners.
Okay, thank you for that. Right here.
Hello, good morning. My name is Åsa Regnér. I'm Deputy Head of UN Women in New York. And we're proud partners with Brazil. We have an office there and so on. And with your leadership within the G20 context coming up, the Security Council, and the importance that Brazil has in the LAC region and thus also in the world, we know that women both suffer enormously in armed conflict and in war times, but we also know that their leadership and organizations can be part of the solution. Will Brazil emphasize women's rights and women's peace and security going forward? And how would you, what are your thoughts on that? Thank you very much.
Yes, no doubt, that's a very important issue. We are very active in UN Women. We were at the beginning, the creation of UN Women. We were in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, our then permanent representative in New York, Antonio Patriota, was the president for the whole year of the UN Women Conference. And of course, it's a permanent issue. It's a permanent item in the government program. President Lula created many new ministries, and one of them for women, a ministry for women. And of course, the protection of women, protecting against aggression and all kinds, and also promoting women and the position of women is very important. He has 11 women in his cabinet, 11 ministers who are women. And also in other areas, in the Foreign Service, I appointed for the first time in 200 years of history, a woman to be the deputy foreign minister. She is the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And below the Secretary General, we have 10 secretaries. 3 of them are women, which is more, it's a bigger proportion than the number of women in the Foreign Service. We have 23% of the total members of Foreign Service are women, and we are having 30% of women participating in important position, higher position. And I have in my office many advisors, one of them is here, many women. It's very important, it's very central. President Lula also wants to have it very clear in his program. He wants to empower women in Brazil, as in the world as in general. 51% of the population are women, so they need to be and to reach higher positions.
Thank you for that. Are there more questions? Right, excellent. There's one there. I have more. Go ahead, please.
I'm Roberto Alvarez. I'm the Foreign Minister of the Dominican Republic. Minister Vieira, regionalism is more important than ever. How do you see Brazil's role, leadership in Latin America and the Caribbean as a whole evolving?
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I know we're meeting this sometime this afternoon or tomorrow, I'm not sure, but I know we have a meeting. That's a very good question, because it's part of President Lula's goals in foreign policy to have a more active role in the region. We were, as I said at the beginning, we were absent from the region. We had very few dialogues with countries, with our 10 neighbors, and if you consider Latin America as a larger part of the continent and the Caribbean, we have had very few contacts during the last 4 years. But the president, immediately after his oath of office, he gave me instructions to send to the Argentinians who were, for instance, on the presidency of CELAC, the Conference of Latin American and Caribbean Countries, saying that Brazil was going back to the organization and we would go back and attend the meetings, which we did on the 24th of January. There was the meeting, the summit, the presidential meeting of CELAC in Buenos Aires, and we were back, and that was the presence of Brazil was greeted by all nations, because we had formally sent communications saying that Brazil would no longer take part in this organization. Besides that, there are many others that we could be active, like UNASUR, which was, well, of course, limited to South America, but which was abandoned too, and we are examining possibilities of going back and have the organization in its previous status and the previous goals for the region. And besides that, of course, all others, like the OAS I mentioned already, and more active relations with CARICOM. And of course, Mercosur is a very important project, which is old now and progressing and very important for the 4 countries that integrate Mercosur. We want to get back to the region and get in touch with the countries. It's very important to organize the action, the international and multilateral action of the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, including to try to solve problems like reform of global governance like United Nations. I haven't said anything so far, but it's very important to reform not only the Security Council. Of course, we have maybe to start by the Security Council, but we have to reform the methods of work of the General Assembly and to update the whole organization. UN is in a kind of paralysis these moments, and we need to have a more active UN that would fill the role that's expected and the important role that it had from 1945 when it was established. There were 54 members, if I'm not mistaken. Today, there are 193. So four times more, roughly. It's obvious that something has to be done to give voice to many other countries, developing countries. And it's not only United Nations, it's WTO, World Trade Organization. It's in a total paralysis. It's a very important instrument, a very important tool. And especially for us, we promote multilateralism. We think that it's better, the best tool that we can use. Multilateralism is much better than weapons.
Thank you for that. Okay, we have about 4 more minutes, 3 more minutes. There's a question up here.
Thank you. My name is Corine Ennemate. I'm a member of parliament, of the Dutch parliament, and I'm of the Green Party. I missed the very beginning of the interview, so I hope I don't duplicate questions, but I wanted to know how you prioritize climate change. Of course, in your country, it starts with protecting your own nature, but I wonder if you could elaborate on that, please.
Thank you for that. We have indeed touched on it, but not as much as you might think. So
yeah, well, I'll just add a few more words. The Ministry of Environment in Brazil is led by a woman who is very well known worldwide, Marina Silva. She's an activist of the preservation of Amazon. She's very knowledgeable. She's very present. She was a senator. She is now a member of the House of Representatives, and she was also Minister of Environment of President Lula in the first term. The goal is, let's say, the policy is stated in his speech in Sharm el-Sheikh at COP27. It's to put in value the preservation of the Amazonia, stopping completely deforestation till 2028, and recovering some 18 million hectares of the deforested land in that region, which is a huge area. Of course, I also mentioned it, agriculture and agribusiness is very important in Brazil. It has important weight in the economy, but we can have both. We can continue to be the second larger exporter, producer and exporter of foodstuff, and preserving the nature and preserving especially the Amazon. Only the big production we have only uses 10% of the total lands of the country. So, and be sure that environment and climate change will be in the center of the concerns of the government. President Lula has said so many times that the planet is giving signs of stress, that so many tragedies provoked by climate change are happening and killing people. We have to act. We still have time to do that, but we have to be to start acting and doing something now.
On that note, we're going to have to draw to a close. So I'm not going to ask the Minister then about the Mercosur trade agreement, whether Brazil is going to push for that, not about the EU Latin American Caribbean Summit this summer, and not about how Brazil might bolster its own democratic institutions. All those for another conversation. But thank you all for coming. Thank you for terrific questions. Please join me in thanking the Minister.